I'm just going to put you on speaker.
And guys are good to go.
Welcome to Valley News Now. I'm Adam Shelfer, joined by Lisa Green. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us, and what a fun topic we have today.
Oh my gosh, it happened on Friday, but I think a lot of us are still basking in the
Wow.
northern lights that we got to experience. It was incredible. It was a major solar storm. I'm sure you've heard about it, but I mean, this was one for the history books.
Wow.
We had pictures and reports coming in from all 50 states. And I don't think that's happened before. Even Hawaii came in with some pictures as well. So to have aurora that far south is remarkable for that type of storm. And, oftentimes we'll see them up here in the northern U.S., but not everybody gets to see them in the south. So that's why everybody was having such a big reaction to it.
And, I've had family and friends all across the country, and it was kind of cool just seeing on social media such an event, kind of having everybody across the country looking up at the night sky and enjoying it and seeing the different views, whether it was from Colorado or different national parks across the country. Some amazing images from that Dickinson area and Medora as well. And so I feel like everyone got a pretty good show, but it feels like North Dakota got a really good show.
We did. We got so many pictures and video in from viewers, and you can access those in our gallery, and we'll tell you how to get to that too coming up here. This was one of them. This is a time lapse, and I picked this one because it's just so cool. Let me move forward here so we can see who sent this to us. This was from Lyle Knight, and this was in the Findlay area the night of Friday and into early Saturday morning. And you can see the time lapse. These are stars that on that time lapse. They look like streaks, but they're actually stars. And you can see several rounds where the aurora just exploded in those views of green, those pillars of pink that showed up there before we got to daybreak. And of course, the time lapse ended there. But it was such an incredible display. And this is just, again, one of the many awesome pictures and videos we got.
And it's really fascinating. This is something that has captured the minds and the imaginations of different, cultures and mythologies and everything. But there is some serious science behind it. And so I got to ask you, what are we actually looking at when we see these displays?
Right. So what's going on here is we have the solar wind. That's particles coming from the sun interacting with the Earth's atmosphere, one of tippy top layers of the Earth's atmosphere called the magnetosphere or the magnetic field. So I've got a little explainer here so we can take a look at what exactly we were experiencing. So of course we're looking at the Earth there, and then here's a look at that magnetic field. It's huge. It goes way beyond the Earth, and it's responsible for actually protecting us from the sun's radiation. If we didn't have this, we'd be in some big trouble. But it also is responsible for directing that solar wind toward us and to create those northern lights that we see. So what happened on Friday, well, actually it was a couple of days. It takes a couple of days before that wind to arrive after anything happens on the sun. It's 93 million miles away. It takes a little bit of time to travel. But we saw a big event where we had multiple solar flares happen, and that produced solar wind that made its way toward the magnetosphere, and it's charged particles, so protons, electrons, that are going toward the Earth, and then they run into that magnetosphere. And notice those arrows. What's happening is they're getting directed around the magnetic field, so that's kind of steering them, and it directs them to the poles where the field is the weakest. And that's why we see the northern lights happen at the poles, in the north and south pole here. It's only rare events where we see them move as far south as the lower mid-latitudes, even the tropics, because we did have some, again, reports of northern lights in the Caribbean. On a cruise ship, someone had sent a picture in of those northern lights, or at least reported that. So once that solar wind makes its way to the Earth's atmosphere, those charged particles are colliding with the molecules in the air. And the two most abundant, nitrogen and oxygen. So it's interacting with those, and it's exciting those molecules, and that creates a glow that has a color to it, varying colors depending on height and what type of molecule that solar wind is interacting with. So Adam, you're standing next to the description of why we see certain colors. So red auroras at the top there, that's when the solar wind's interacting with oxygen molecules. way up in the atmosphere. We're talking 124 miles plus above that, where we're seeing that happen. Now, kind of at the same level, oftentimes we see a lot of those green auroras. Those are oxygen molecules again, but a little bit lower in the atmosphere. And then blue auroras are nitrogen molecules. And pink auroras, those are the ones that are lowest. That's below 62 miles above the Earth. And just to kind of give you some perspective, most of the Earth's weather happens 10 miles or lower above the Earth. So that is what's called the troposphere, the lowest level of the atmosphere. So that's way up. That's 6 times up from that lowest level. So that gives you an idea of how high up these interactions are happening. But it's cool to know like what you're seeing when you see those colors. Like when we saw the green auroras, like, oh, those are the oxygen molecules getting excited by the solar wind right now. And that's kind of in the mid-levels of the magnetic field.
And, you know, I, like so many other people,
Yeah.
hopped in the car, drove a little bit, half hour or more or so, outside of the city lights and got a look. And it's at times hard to find. It was also interesting, we were talking about how it actually comes in a little bit better on the cell phone.
Yeah.
But, you know, maybe a little misleading. But when I took the photos with my friend, I said, just tell everybody this is what we
This is
saw.
what you saw.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing is, you know, our eyes are different from our cameras. You know, we can only take in so much, and cameras can really take in the light, especially when you have a larger exposure, a longer exposure rather. It can take in more of that light, and then you can see those colors even more vibrantly. So yes, a lot of us did see that. You know, you're looking at it and it's like a faint kind of, almost sometimes looking like a cloud that has a little bit of a tint to it. But then on your phones, it's super duper vibrant, which is cool to be able to capture that.
Well, what kind of viewing tips do you have for people who are looking to try to catch these displays?
Sure. Well, okay, let's talk about that because we're still in an active solar cycle. We do have the sun, it goes through cycles of activity every 11 years. And right now we're in a very active cycle. So it's still very possible that the sun could produce more solar flares. And if they're directed at the Earth, then we could see more northern lights. In fact, we just had a solar flare reported recently. But here's the thing, the weather has to cooperate, right?
Sure.
And so that's always something we want to look at. So here's some of my viewing tips here. First of all, best viewing is at local midnight. Well, what does that mean? It means that, of course, we're on daylight saving time. So we're an hour ahead of the actual time.
Okay.
And so local midnight for us is 1 a.m.
Okay.
And the reason for midnight is because, you know, we want to be pointed away from the sun, and that's when we're most pointed, you know, most away from the sun, where we are locally, and that solar wind is coming down from the sun. So the sun's hitting the Earth in the magnetic field. Well, it's getting directed like I just showed you, and then coming down. So it's going to make its lowest point around that time, generally speaking. But as we saw on Friday, even before then, as long as the sun's down and it's dark, you can still see them before and after as well. So that's just one viewing tip, especially if the aurora are going to be a little weaker and you might not have that opportunity to watch it all night long. Again, weather, that's critical, of course. Like a day like today, we have cloud cover, overcast skies. So, you know, don't waste your time heading out to see the solar, the northern lights if, you know, you can't see them anyway because of the clouds. So always check the forecast. You can always check the satellite map too on our VNL weather app. And then if you have good weather, you want to move away from some city lights. You want to head to the north, and you can move east or west. I'm talking in relation to Fargo, but any city really, because you're looking toward that magnetic pole. You're looking toward the north to see that activity. So if you can put that light pollution behind you, it's going to interfere less with your viewing than, say, if it's maybe to your left or to your right, or if it's right in front of you. That's definitely going to interfere with it. And obviously you want to look to that northern horizon.
Now, I know it's kind of hard to predict when something like this might occur, but you said we are in an active stage right now for the sun, and so when do you think we might be able to see this again, if you are able to make that kind of prediction?
Sure, that can be very tough because you know we don't know when the sun's going to have one of its flares. We sometimes call them like a little burp of solar radiation that happens. That can be tough to predict. The good thing is we have a lot of lead time, a couple of days once that happens, because it takes a while for that solar wind to travel that 93 million miles from the sun to the Earth. So we'll see a flare, and then if it's directed at the Earth, sometimes they're not, so we don't have that interaction. But if it is, then, you know, in a couple of days, we can predict that there is the potential for northern lights. So we have a couple of days lead time when we hear about those solar flares, and sometimes just if the magnetic field is already disturbed by previous solar storms, sometimes even a little bit of solar wind can cause northern lights too. So it can be tough to predict, but we do have a couple of tools that can help us to know that one may occur. And if we do, we'll let you know and give you that heads up so you can get out and check this out.
Oh, sounds like everybody's got to follow along, and you'll keep us posted, is what you're telling us?
Yes, yeah. We're still in the active cycle, and I mentioned earlier, we just had a solar flare, so it's still happening. We probably won't see anything like what we saw on Friday. That's an unusual event to have that happen back to back, but again, chances for more northern lights are there.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, before we let you go, let's take a look at some of these just incredible viewer pictures we got submitted.
I know, I can't get enough of these. They're really cool, and really, I mean, this is just a few of the northern lights that we saw. There we go. There's that green and then the red that you see there. This was taken, we don't have a location for this, but Glenn sent this one to us. But just an incredible view there of the northern lights there and the changing of the colors depending on height yet again. And let's move forward to the next one. And that was, of course, oxygen that we were looking at different levels. This is another great one. I love it when folks do the framed things, like whether it's people or maybe you have like a really cool maybe farm implement that you have sitting out in your field that you can frame with the northern lights. This was cool. Thanks, Justin, for sharing that one. That was more of that blue glow and then another green glow here.
Look at this one.
Yeah, and you can see, and the great thing is if this is air that's moving, the solar wind is moving, and so it's not static. It's dancing. It's these pillars moving, and it's kind of almost looking like a snake with the movement of the curves on that. So sometimes you can just see some incredible things. And this was in the Leonard area, not too far from Fargo, and actually a little bit south and west of Fargo. So there probably was a little bit of light pollution interfering, but we still got a great show because those northern lights were so strong. And look, we've got a constellation here. That's Cassiopeia right there.
Wow, look at
showing
that.
up to the north there. So cool to see that interacting with a view of the constellations. We also had a crescent moon that night. It was just, if you are a sky watcher, it was just a dream to see.
A perfect storm, if you will.
There we go. A perfect solar storm that we got to see. Yeah. So, of course, we want to see your photos. I know there are a lot more folks that took some photos out there. So if you want to share them with us, or if you just want to go to our gallery and see all of these incredible pictures and videos, it's really easy. Just through the VNL Weather app, go to the bottom of the screen. There's a submit button right there, and then just add your media. And then you can also go to our gallery and see the latest on all of the northern lights, hundreds of pictures that have been submitted.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot, and it's great.
Yeah, it's super, super cool, and I'll definitely be keeping an ear and an eye out for the next time we have an event like this. And like you said, just very cool to have such a rare, majestic display. Yes. And so, keep sending those pictures in because we're certainly enjoying them.
Yeah, and I just love that everybody, like you mentioned earlier, everybody got to partake in it. It was a communal thing across the country, given that everybody in every single state, I shouldn't say everybody, but someone in every single state got to see them. I mean, that's incredible.
Everybody without an early bedtime.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for joining us on Valley News Now. And we'll hear more from you and the whole weather team for the rest of the time on some more typical situations, maybe some rain, some stuff like that.
Other weather phenomena. You and I are going to talk tomorrow, hopefully, about the wildfire situation.
Yeah.
Some interesting things to talk about there as well heading into the season.
Absolutely. Just some very interesting science, I think, is the big theme with some of these conversations we get to have.
And we love to talk about it.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.